This is WorkSpan TV. I'm Ryan Johnson from World at Work, talking with Andy Goldstein from Towers Watson today about the shift in executive compensation design. Andy, some of your recent research indicates that we may be at somewhat of a pivot point or tipping point in exec comp design. What do you mean by that?
If you look at what's happened over the last few years, particularly with say on pay and a lot of the external factors and pressures around executive compensation, we've really witnessed a dramatic convergence towards the middle. And when we talk about convergence towards the middle, that applies to both pay levels as well as pay programs and program design. And so now the question is that where we're here to stay? Have we kind of reached the tipping point, and perhaps the pendulum is ready to swing back the other way with some more innovative program designs?
I'm seeing a lot of conversation about this move to the middle, as you've talked about. And I'm wondering, what is it specifically you're seeing? Is it in the long-term incentive? Is it in the cash? What is it?
Well, long-term incentive programs would be a great example where we've really witnessed this convergence around the middle, or this race to the middle. And one example of that would be in the use of relative total shareholder return for long-term incentive programs. Right now, in fact, TSR, total shareholder return, is now the #1 most prevalent metric in long-term incentive program performance plans.
Is that a good thing, or is that maybe not such a good thing?
Well, we think that there's positives and negatives, but we definitely see some of the negatives of that. One of those negatives is that TSR really is an outcome or an output, and what we'd like the incentive plans to do is really drive the performance that ultimately produces that higher total shareholder return for investors.
So there's a balance that's occurring here, and on the one side, maybe the scale is tipped a little bit towards conformity, but on the other side, in terms of design, you can also talk about tailored approaches. How are companies approaching this balance between the need to conform, or their sense that they need to conform, and the idea that they also want to be tailored in order to be competitive?
Well, there's no doubt that regulation, including say on pay and the proxy advisors that have had enormous influence and have been part of the root cause of this convergence around the middle. We're encouraging companies to take a more tailored approach to the design of their incentive programs, and by that we mean relooking at their strategy and the execution of that strategy, and what are the key drivers of all of that, and thinking about their human capital and what do they really need to maintain a competitive advantage in the marketplace. You know, the pay programs really have an opportunity to create a competitive advantage for companies. And this race or convergence to the middle, a lot of that competitive advantage has been lost.
Now, if you think about this on a continuum or a pendulum swinging, has it already reached the apex on the conformity side, and is it ready to come back to the tailored side, or do you think it has further to go on the conformity side?
We believe that in today's environment that the pendulum will not swing any further than it has today, absent mandatory say on pay. And if that happens in the United States, that's a game changer, of course. But we believe that it's really swung as far in that direction as it's going to, in a large sense, and is ready to swing back towards the middle.
So Andy, what are the very best companies that you work with? What are they doing to balance this idea of conformity versus tailored, and are they seeing competitive advantage by doing it that way? We
studied a group of companies that would fall into the category of sustainable high-performing organizations to try to distinguish what characteristics of their pay programs perhaps have contributed to being a sustainable high-performing company. Some of the things that we found are, first of all, a large emphasis on long-term incentives relative to cash compensation and short-term incentives, and also a greater use of metrics, both the numbers of metrics and types of metrics for the incentive programs, even to some degree with some overlap between the short and the long-term incentives. The other thing that we observed is that these types of organizations really do focus on individual performance and work very hard to create differentiation around individual performance and how they reward the highest performing, highest contributors of their organization.
So as we've always heard about compensation, you really shouldn't think about it as one size fits all. You try to customize the package, use all the total rewards in the toolkit, and it sounds like that's what people, or at least good companies, are doing with executive pay today.
Precisely, that's exactly right, and there's room for companies to improve in that area, and we're encouraging companies to step out from the middle and begin to do that.
I want to thank Andy Goldstein from Towers Watson here to talk about the shift in balance in executive compensation design and for WorkSpan TV and World at Work, I'm Ryan Johnson.